The name Nostradamus echoes through the corridors of time like a whispered incantation, a cipher half revealed and half concealed in the shadows of history. To speak of him is to invoke not merely a man, but an enigma wrapped in the velvet folds of prophecy, a figure who straddled the visible and invisible worlds with the ease of one who knew their secrets. His quatrains, those cryptic verses that have tantalized scholars and skeptics alike for centuries, are more than mere predictions. They are fragments of a grander design, a tapestry woven from the threads of occult wisdom, celestial alignments, and the murmurs of unseen forces. To understand Nostradamus is to step into a realm where time bends, where past, present, and future are not linear progressions, but reflections in an alchemical mirror. His prophecies did not emerge from a vacuum. They were born from the crucible of esoteric traditions, astrology, Kabbalah, Hermetic philosophy, practices that sought to decode the universe's hidden language. He was not simply a seer, but an initiate, a man who walked the razor's edge between the known and the unknowable, drawing his visions from the same wellspring that nourished the mystics and magicians of antiquity. Imagine, if you will, the dim glow of a candle in a midnight study, the air thick with the scent of dried herbs and aged parchment. Here Nostradamus would commune with the stars, tracing their celestial dance across the heavens, translating their movements into the cryptic verses that would later baffle the world. His methods were not those of cold calculation, but of sacred ritual, a marriage of intellect and intuition, of science and sorcery. The quatrains were not written so much as received, channeled from a place beyond ordinary perception, where the veil between worlds grows thin. Yet, for all their obscurity, his prophecies have endured. Not because they offer clear roadmaps of the future, but because they resonate with something deeper, an archetypal truth that speaks to the collective unconscious. They are like dreams half remembered upon waking, fragments that shimmer with significance even as they elude full comprehension. This is the paradox of Nostradamus. The more one seeks to pin down his meanings, the more they slip away, like smoke through grasping fingers. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps his true gift was not in predicting specific events, but in awakening within us the recognition that the future is not fixed, but fluid, shaped by forces both seen and unseen. To explore the secret life of Nostradamus is to embark on a journey into the occult undercurrents that shaped his visions. It is to peer behind the curtain of his public persona, the physician, the scholar, and glimpse the shadowy practices that fueled his prophetic fire. This is not a path for the faint of heart, for it demands that we confront the unsettling idea that reality is far stranger, far more malleable than we have been led to believe. It asks us to consider that the boundaries between prophecy and magic, between foresight and forbidden knowledge, are far more porous than we might imagine. And so, we begin not with answers, but with questions that coil like serpents around the pillars of certainty, challenging us to look deeper. What rituals did Nostradamus perform to unlock his visions? What spirits, if any, did he invoke in the stillness of the night? How much of his foresight was divine inspiration, and how much was the result of deliberate, occult technique? These are the mysteries that beckon us forward into the labyrinth of his legacy. To step into the mind of Nostradamus is to wander through a hall of mirrors, each reflection distorting and revealing some facet of a truth too vast to be held in a single thought. His prophecies were not mere predictions. They were living entities, shaped by the convergence of ancient wisdom, celestial mechanics, and the shadowy arts of divination. At the heart of his work lies a triad of core themes, inseparable from one another. Like the strands of a braided cord, the interplay of cosmic order and chaos, the alchemy of time, and the hidden language of symbols. These are not static ideas, but currents, flowing through his quatrains with a rhythm that mimics the pulse of the universe itself. Consider first the cosmic dance of order and chaos, a duality that Nostradamus understood not as opposing forces, but as partners in an eternal waltz. His prophecies often speak of upheaval, wars, plagues, the fall of kings. Yet beneath the surface of catastrophe, there is always an undercurrent of cyclical return, a suggestion that even the most violent disruptions are part of a greater pattern. This was not pessimism, but a recognition of the world's inherent dynamism, a vision shaped by his immersion in astrological traditions. The planets in their measured orbits were both timekeepers and omens, their alignments acting as celestial triggers for earthly events. When Nostradamus gazed at the stars, he did not see random points of light, but a grand interlocking mechanism, a clockwork of fate where every turn of the gear heralded some shift in the human drama below. Yet, his understanding of time was anything but mechanical. Here we encounter the second theme, the alchemy of time, the notion that past, present, and future are not rigidly partitioned but fluid, permeable. His famous centuries do not unfold in a neat chronology. Instead, they loop in spiral, with images from medieval battles overlapping with visions of modern warfare, as if history were a tapestry where threads from different eras could suddenly knot together. This was not carelessness, but a deliberate reflection of his belief in temporal synchronicity, the idea that certain moments resonate across ages, bound by shared energetic signatures. In this view, prophecy was less about seeing the future than about recognizing recurring patterns, like a musician detecting the same melody played in different keys across the centuries. And then there is the language of symbols, the third pillar of his craft. Nostradamus did not write in plain speech but in a lexicon of metaphors, allegories, and arcane references, a code designed to conceal as much as it revealed. Animals, celestial bodies, and elemental forces populate his verses, each carrying layers of meaning accessible only to those versed in the Hermetic traditions. A lion might signify a king, a comet, a divine warning, a tempest, the tumult of revolution. This was not mere obfuscation, but a necessary safeguard, for he operated in an era when the wrong prophecy could mean persecution or worse. More than that, it was an acknowledgement that some truths cannot be spoken directly. They must be cloaked, slipped into the world like contraband, to be unpacked only when the time is ripe. Beneath these themes thrived something darker, more visceral, the occult practices that fueled his visions. Nostradamus was rumored to engage in scrying, using a bowl of water or a polished mirror to enter trance states where the boundaries of ordinary perception dissolved. Some accounts suggest rituals involving invocations, the burning of specific herbs to alter consciousness, or the use of planetary hours to amplify his connection to the unseen. Whether these methods were purely symbolic or literal acts of magic is a debate that lingers, but their imprint on his work is undeniable. His prophecies bear the marks of a mind that did not just calculate the future but journeyed into it, a traveler slipping between the folds of reality to bring back fragments of what lay ahead. What emerges from these core themes is a portrait of a man who stood at the crossroads of science and mysticism, reason and revelation. His genius lay not in any single method, but in the synthesis, the ability to weave together astronomy, medicine, Kabbalah, and folk magic into a cohesive system of foresight. He was, in many ways, a bridge between worlds, his quatrains serving as portals that readers could enter, each interpreting the symbols according to their own epoch's fears and hopes. To read Nostradamus literally is to miss the point entirely. His prophecies breathe not in the stark light of fact, but in the twilight realm of symbol and allegory, where meaning coils like a serpent waiting to strike. His verses are not straightforward chronicles of future events, but mythic fragments, echoes of a deeper narrative that transcends time. They function as dreams do, oblique, layered, speaking the language of the subconscious. To decipher them, one must abandon the rigid logic of historians and embrace the fluid intuition of poets and mystics. Consider the recurring motif of the great King of Terror, a figure who descends from the skies in one of Nostradamus's most infamous quatrains. On the surface, it seems to predict a cataclysmic event, perhaps a comet, a nuclear strike, or some other apocalyptic force. But to stop there is to ignore the archetypal weight of the image. The great King of Terror is not merely a future disaster. It is the shadow that has haunted humanity's collective psyche since the first civilizations looked upward in dread and awe. It is the specter of divine retribution, the wrath of gods, the inevitable reckoning that cultures from Babylon to the modern era have prophesied in their own terms. Nostradamus was not predicting a single event. He was tapping into an eternal fear, a narrative as old as time itself, reminding us that every age has its own version of the end. Similarly, his references to beasts, lions, wolves, monstrous birds, are not zoological forecasts but mythic codes. In medieval symbolism, the lion was both a sign of royalty and a portent of war. The wolf embodied treachery and upheaval. Great birds often heralded divine messengers or omens. When Nostradamus wrote of these creatures, he was invoking a shared symbolic language, one that resonated with the folkloric and esoteric traditions of his time. A modern reader might see Hitler in the Hister of his prophecies, or Napoleon in the Pauper Prince, but these are only the latest masks worn by archetypes that have existed for millennia. The figures change, but the roles remain the same: the tyrant, the conqueror, the fallen angel, all part of an endless cycle of rise and ruin. Even his celestial imagery, comets, eclipses, blood moons, operates on multiple levels. To the rationalist, they are mere astronomical phenomena. To the occultist, they are cosmic signatures, divine handwriting in the sky. Nostradamus lived in an age where the heavens were still alive with meaning, where a comet was not just a ball of ice but a herald of revolution, where an eclipse was not merely an alignment of spheres, but a veil briefly lifted between worlds. His prophecies assume this living cosmos, one where the movements of planets and stars are not cold mechanics, but a language spoken by the universe itself. Perhaps the most profound of his symbolic narratives is the theme of the hidden king, the savior or enlightened ruler who appears in times of darkness, sometimes from obscurity, to restore balance. This figure appears across cultures: the Chakravartin of Hindu prophecy, the second coming of Christian eschatology, the Kalki avatar who ends the Kali Yuga. Nostradamus, steeped in the syncretic mysticism of the Renaissance, wove this archetype into his verses, suggesting that even in the bleakest of futures, there exists the possibility of renewal. It is a reminder that prophecy is not merely about doom, but about the cyclical nature of existence, the inevitable return of light after darkness. These deeper narratives suggest that Nostradamus was less concerned with predicting specific events than with mapping the eternal patterns of human destiny. His quatrains are less a crystal ball and more a hall of mirrors, each reflecting a different facet of the same timeless truths. They force us to confront the unsettling idea that history is not linear, but fractal, that the same stories, the same tragedies and triumphs play out again and again, only in different costumes. The quatrains of Nostradamus have never been passive artifacts of history. They are living texts, pulsing with an urgency that demands engagement rather than passive awe. To treat them as mere curiosities or fatalistic predictions is to misunderstand their function entirely. The true power of his prophecies lies not in their ability to foretell events with surgical precision, but in how they serve as mirrors for the present, as tools for navigating uncertainty, and as reminders that the future is not a fixed destination, but a landscape shaped by perception, choice, and the invisible currents of collective consciousness. Consider the practical paradox at the heart of prophecy. If a vision of the future is revealed, does that not alter the trajectory of events? Nostradamus himself seemed to operate within this tension. His verses are often warnings, veiled but urgent, suggesting that foresight carries with it an implicit responsibility. The plagues, wars, and political collapses he described were not inevitable in the sense of being predestined, but in the sense of being probable outcomes of humanity's recurring cycles of hubris, division, and neglect. In this light, his work transforms from a static script into a dynamic map, one that highlights the cliffs and whirlpools ahead, not to paralyze us with fear, but to empower us to steer differently. This perspective has profound implications for how we interpret his symbols in the modern world. Take, for example, his much-debated references to fire from the sky and cities brought to ruin. The literalist might fixate on identifying these as predictions of nuclear war or asteroid impacts. But the deeper lesson lies in recognizing the pattern these images evoke: humanity's perpetual dance with self-destruction, the precarious balance between innovation and catastrophe. The value of such prophecies today is not in their specificity, but in their ability to jar us awake, to remind us that the crises of our age, whether environmental collapse, technological overreach, or geopolitical strife, are not unprecedented, but part of a recurring narrative that we have the power to rewrite. Similarly, Nostradamus's enigmatic references to the Great Revival and periods of renewal following darkness offer more than vague comfort. They provide a framework for resilience. In an era of climate anxiety, social fragmentation, and existential uncertainty, his cyclical view of history suggests that collapse and rebirth are intertwined. The practical takeaway is not passivity, it's all foretold, but agency. If we recognize the signs of recurring patterns, we can consciously work to mitigate disaster and cultivate renewal. This is where the occult dimension of his work becomes unexpectedly pragmatic. The rituals and symbolic systems he employed were not mere superstition, but technologies of consciousness, ways of attuning the mind to perceive deeper rhythms beneath the chaos of the present moment. Modern applications of this principle might take many forms. Policymaker versed in the symbolic language of Nostradamian prophecy might approach geopolitical tensions not as isolated incidents, but as manifestations of ancient archetypes, the rise and fall of empires, the recurring tension between unity and division. An environmental activist might draw on his imagery of natural omens, floods, celestial signs, the earth shaking, not as literal predictions, but as metaphors underscoring the interconnectedness of human actions and planetary systems. Even on a personal level, his work invites a shift in perspective, viewing one's life not as a linear path, but as part of a larger tapestry where challenges are not random, but initiatory, echoes of the same trials humanity has faced for millennia, demanding the same wisdom to navigate. This brings us to the most contentious and practical question of all. Can prophecy in any form be trusted? The answer lies not in blind faith, but in discernment. Nostradamus himself encoded his visions precisely because he understood their power to mislead as much as to enlighten. The practical wisdom in his approach is the recognition that foresight is not about certainty, but about preparation, not about knowing exactly what will happen, but developing the perceptual flexibility to meet whatever arises. In a world drowning in data, yet starving for meaning, his legacy offers a counterbalance, a reminder that some truths are not found in the glare of facts, but in the interplay of symbol, intuition, and the unspoken patterns that shape our collective destiny. The legacy of Nostradamus does not reside in the accuracy of his predictions, but in the unsettling mirror he holds up to humanity's restless soul. Across 5 centuries, his words have endured not because they offer a roadmap to the future, but because they articulate something far more profound: the eternal tension between fate and free will, between the illusion of control and the vast, unseen currents that shape civilizations. His prophecies are less about what will happen and more about what always happens, the recurring dramas of power, pride, catastrophe, and renewal that define the human story. To engage with his work is not to submit to predestination, but to awaken to the patterns that have always governed us, and in seeing them clearly, perhaps to break the cycle. There is a transformative power in this realization. Nostradamus did not write for scholars alone, but for those willing to peer behind the veil of the ordinary, to recognize that history is not a straight line but a spiral, where the same lessons appear again and again, each time in different garb. The wars he described are not just medieval conflicts or world wars, but any era's struggle between destruction and creation. The tyrants he foresaw wear different masks in different centuries, but their essence remains the same. And the hope he embedded in his verses, the promise of renewal after darkness, is not tied to a specific year or event, but to humanity's enduring capacity to rise from its own ashes. This is where his occult practices become most relevant to our modern age. Nostradamus was not merely a passive recipient of visions. He was an active participant in the unseen, using ritual, symbol, and celestial observation as tools to navigate the unknown. In a world that has largely abandoned such practices in favor of cold rationality, his methods remind us that there are other ways of knowing, that intuition, symbolism, and the language of dreams have always been part of how humanity makes sense of chaos. The call here is not to abandon reason, but to expand it, to reclaim the lost art of reading signs, not as superstition, but as a deeper engagement with reality. What, then, is the transformational invitation of Nostradamus? It is this: to recognize that the future is not fixed, but fluid, a tapestry still being woven, where every thread we pull today alters the pattern of tomorrow. His prophecies are not a script to be feared, but a challenge to be met. If we see in his visions of disaster a reflection of our own capacity for destruction, then the antidote lies in our hands. If we recognize in his symbols of renewal the possibility of a different path, then the choice to walk it is ours. The true secret of Nostradamus was never about predicting fate. It was about awakening to our role in shaping it. So let us close not with an ending, but with an opening. The final quatrain has not yet been written. The next turn of the spiral is ours to influence. The question is no longer what Nostradamus saw, but what we, armed with both his warnings and our own will, choose to do with the time that remains.